Hey, how's it going, universe? Shaun here from Zoobox, and today we're going to be delving into some straight trash, straight to VOD trash, VOD trash. Okay, this movie came out a couple weeks ago, and I don't know why I watched it. It was on my radar because Mel Gibson's in it. Mel Gibson has kind of been relegated to this kind of stuff in the past few years, the past decade. These kind of bit parts, or even sometimes starring roles in kind of mediocre movies. Guy just wants to act. He wants to do his thing, but because of all the public controversy surrounding him, I think he has a hard time getting a job. So he ends up in stuff like this. But I always end up watching it. I always end up checking it out. And this came out a few weeks ago. I saw the trailer. I was like, nah, it doesn't look very good. It's reminded me of something that would have come out back in like the late '90s. You know, one of those nice mediocre action movies of the late '90s. And probably would have done okay. Would have made its money back. Everybody would have been happy. I feel like these kind of movies are almost like scams. They're almost like tax scams or something. The film is called Force of Nature, if I didn't say that already, and it's directed by Michael Polish, written by Corey M. Miller. It stars Emil Hirsch, Mel Gibson, David Zayas, Kate Bosworth, Stephanie Cayo, and William Catlett. The description is a gang of thieves plan a heist during a hurricane and encounter trouble when a cop tries to force everyone in the building to evacuate. So yeah, this film takes place in Puerto Rico, and it has to do with these people trying to steal these paintings out of like an apartment complex, and it's in the midst of or the beginning of a giant hurricane, and they're trying to evacuate the city, and some people don't want to leave, so these cops end up there. Emil Hirsch being one of them, and they try to get everybody out while these guys are trying to break in. And that actually doesn't sound like an awful plot. It doesn't sound like an awful framework to hang kind of a fun thriller action movie on. And for the early goings of the movie, it almost feels like it's going to succeed, honestly. It has the right tone. You really do feel like you're taken back to a simpler time in movies, because the movie is very straightforward. It's very simple. There isn't a lot there. There is some character development with Emil Hirsch's character, that he is kind of a fallen cop. He had done something kind of fucked up by accident and then ends up in Puerto Rico because it's the only place he can get a job. Mel Gibson plays kind of this grizzled, retired cop, and he doesn't want to leave. He's like, hurricanes ain't no big deal. I can live through this. Ain't no big deal. And then these people come and try to steal these paintings, and for some reason they feel the necessity to stop them from doing so. I guess maybe because they feel that their lives are threatened or whatnot. And it's a weird movie. It's weirdly constructed. It does this thing in the middle, in the beginning of the movie. It shows you a 40 seconds of the middle of the movie where like there's an apex moment where something could or could not happen. And then it cuts to the beginning of the movie, to the credits. And then right after the credits, you're introduced to Emil Hirsch's character, and they give you like a partial flashback for him as well. Like I said, he's kind of he's done something wrong in his past. He feels really guilty about it, to the point where he's like ready to commit suicide. He hates life. He hates being a cop in Puerto Rico, and he's let everything go. He's let himself go. He has no ethic. He's kind of a POS, but not really too bad. And the movie follows him as he tries to evacuate these people and stop this heist. But it's weirdly constructed because it doesn't need to be that way. It could have been just much more straightforward, instead of trying to do these things, I guess, to draw you into some type of enticement, some type of excitement. Like maybe they thought this would have been a big moment, and this should have been set up so that you could anticipate it later. It is not. It's very weird. It's very weird that it's there. Like the movie probably would have been better off starting at the beginning of Emil Hirsch's story and just followed Emil Hirsch all the way through. But for whatever reason, they decided to do some weird stuff in post. Maybe they just didn't have like enough movie, and they were trying to drag it out, try to get to the 90-minute length. So they're just going to show you the same things that they show you later, more than once. I don't know. It's kind of weird. It's it's forgettable. It's not very good, but like I said in the beginning, I was kind of like, okay, well, I got some problems, but this could be this could be kind of schlocky entertainment. This might be enjoyable on some sort of very like passive, superficial level. Gibson's fun. He always is. This is the kind of role that Gibson's actually kind of excels at. These kind of like little weird, idiosyncratic parts. And you can really, the thing you were reminded of is what a good actor he is, because he can just kind of take something like this nothing role and kind of just give it a little bit of life, give it a little juice. Something that kind of the rest of the cast is not able to accomplish. They're just playing it straight. And Gibson is given a little bit more or something. He's trying. And it's an interesting factoid. Actually, it's in the trivia for the movie. Mel Gibson replaced Bruce Willis, because Bruce Willis, also king of the VOD trash action movies. And he ended up getting paid in rum. It seems like he was probably there for about a week, shooting for a week, because he is very undercooked, very underdeveloped. And I'm very curious, like, how he got on this movie. He must be friends with the director or somebody involved or a producer or something. There's got to be some chain that connects Mel Gibson to the people that made this movie. Otherwise, why the fuck would he be in this movie? And he is by far the best part. And that is, if they had just focused more on these kind of character interactions and dynamics, it could have been interesting. Because the thing you can tell that some of the stars, the bigger stars, mainly Gibson, was not there for the whole time, because he is completely separate from the movie for the vast majority of the runtime. He's doing his own thing. He's like just in an apartment talking to Emile Hirsch's partner. And that's it. And it's entertaining in its own right, I suppose, in a vacuum, but he has almost like no connection to the actual story. His connection is through his daughter, Kate Bosworth's character, who's another person. You're like, where the fuck happened to her? She was like they tried with Kate Bosworth for a while. But anyways, so she's kind of like the connection that he has to Emile Hirsch's character through, in the context of what's going on in the story. But she's just she's not interesting. She's boring. She's a nurse. Nurses are boring, don't you know? It's a fact. My brother Ryan, he's a nurse. Boring as fuck. He'll never watch this. He'll be fine. It's a joke, Ryan. Calm down. Yeah, so I wish there was just kind of more interplay. Like, it was almost more of like a buddy cop situation. Because there's this thing where Gibson's character knows what happened with Emile Hirsch. He knows this big fuck up that landed him where he is. And he's like very ornery about it. He's very like suspicious. He's kind of an asshole because in true Mel Gibson fashion, he's backed into a corner by some kind of authority figure and he just lashes out. Says the meanest shit you can possibly say. This character is no different. This is life and informing art, I suppose, in its own weird way. It would have made the movie just more interesting and dynamic, because as is, it's after about a half hour, it becomes incredibly straightforward in a way that just ends up kind of being boring, because, it's a low budget movie. So it's not like there's going to be tons of crazy set pieces and whatnot. And the few that they do is just not very interesting. It's not shot very well. It's not very dynamic. This is not like, I couldn't recommend that anybody other than somebody that's curious about Mel Gibson's performance watch this. Especially, do not pay for it. If it shows up on Hulu or Netflix or Amazon Prime someday, which it will, within like a month it'll be there. That's when I would say, if you're really bored and you're just in one of those moods where you just can't decide what to watch, stick on Force of Nature. Because I don't hate the movie, and I could tell what it was trying to achieve. It's kind of telling you like, these characters are very close. They've become very close by this experience, and they're very interesting. But it doesn't show you that. It doesn't build that into the scenes. Especially the way the movie ends. The movie ends very oddly, where it's just like, you're like, well, this was not earned. This does not make any sense. In fact, the heist itself, the thing that is kind of the driving, motivating force behind the plot of the movie, doesn't really come into focus until like the last 20 minutes. Everything else is set up. Everything else is character drama. And it's not, the character drama is just not that interesting, honestly. It's just not that great. You figure all of this stuff out way before the movie has any interest in revealing it to you. So you're just the whole time you're kind of confused, just like, why did you just like tell me? Why didn't you just tell me what was up? Because then I would understand what is motivating the behavior of the characters. Like if I knew specifically what happened to Emil Hirsch in the beginning of the movie, then his character makes way more sense. And you're not kind of like confused about his motivations. It wouldn't maybe feel so contrived. And to have this kind of false mystery mechanic just bogs the movie down for kind of no reason. I don't really understand why they went that direction. It feels like a post-production choice, honestly. And like I said, maybe they were concerned about running time. Maybe they needed to hit some sort of benchmark. That happens a lot with like these kind of lower budget movies like this, you know? A lot of times they shoot what ends up being like a 72-minute movie, and they're like, shit, we got to get to fucking at least 88 minutes, at least, with credits. We got to get there. And so they'll do, you know, some reconfiguring in post to try to do that, to try to accomplish that. What's his name? David Zayas. Now, if you were a fan of Dexter from back in the day, David Zayas is one of the police officers that works in the Miami Police Department with Dexter, and he's here as playing the heavy. He does this every once in a while. I've seen him show up in a few action movies where he's playing the quote unquote heavy. The most thing that sticks out in my mind the most is the Expendables, the first Expendables. He's kind of like the bad guy. He's the drug lord. He's the evil dude. And he kind of plays a very kind of similar-ish role, but just kind of a lower scale one. He's more of like a thug dude in this. He's more like an enforcer guy. He likes to get his hands dirty. He likes to do it himself. He doesn't trust anybody. And they don't really do much to develop him at all, or even like kind of why he cares about what he's looking for. Just like I said, it just doesn't feel very motivated. Things just happen because they need to happen as a like kind of mechanical function, and it's very lean in that way. It doesn't give you any extra kind of spice to anybody. And it didn't have to be that way, you know. It could have been something probably more interesting had they taken another few passes at the script or something. Because I do think the kernel of it is something that could be interesting. It could have been a fun movie. And like I said, I thought in the beginning, I was like, oh, maybe this will be like kind of a pleasant surprise. Maybe like a diamond in the rough. Something that everybody's ignored. Nobody's been going to pay any attention to. Force of nature. And maybe it'll be something special. Because I saw some of the reviews, and they just... because of Mel Gibson's involvement, they were just like, this is a racist movie. The bad people are Puerto Rican. It's like, yeah, it takes place in Puerto Rico. The white people are the saviors. It's like, well, those are the stars. Those are the bankable stars. That's the thing, right? This is a fucking business decision. If you can get Mel Gibson, Emile Hirsch, and what's her name? Kate Bosworth. If you can get them on the poster, on your cover, some people are just going to buy that or rent it or whatever just on that. It's not going to have anything to do with anything else. Especially like Mel Gibson, right? Because you're going to be able to get old people who are just going to rent it. Or weirdos like me. You know, Mel Gibson stands out there. Come on, everybody, stand up. Go rent Force of Nature. You know, because I never would have watched this movie if it hadn't been for Mel Gibson. Never would have, not in a million years. Not a million years. We would have just happily passed on by. Probably would have been the right move at the end of the day. But you never know. You know, Mel Gibson did another kind of direct-to-video movie a few years back. Get the Gringo. It was kind of like kind of reminded me of the movie Payback, if you've ever seen Payback. Brian Helgeland's Payback. It had that kind of vibe, that kind of fun pace and dialogue and stuff. And it wasn't bad. It was a pleasant surprise. Like, you just wouldn't expect it to be good. And then I was hoping against hope. Maybe this would be of the same thing, but no. Unfortunately, it's Gibson's clearly doing somebody a favor. He does not phone it in. He doesn't. I think he does a pretty good job for what he's given. He adds all the texture, everything that you would want Mel Gibson to bring to a role. He does that. He does it. He showed up and did his job, and he did it really well. Unfortunately, I just wish he was more involved in the actual plot and the actual story. I'm curious. I wonder if, like, when they got Gibson, or if they would have had Bruce Willis, if like the stipulation was, like a scheduling thing, and like, well, okay, well, we got to reconfigure the story because we're going to put a big star in here, and they're not going to be around for the majority of the shoot. So we got to build the story around that. Maybe that might have been what happened, honestly. But I guess we'll never know. Mel Gibson, though, he did his job. He got his rum, and he went home. He went home, wherever that is. Good old Mel Gibson. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to know more about Zoobox, if you'd like to follow everything Zoobox, there are some links in the description for Facebook, for Instagram, and my personal Twitter. Also, if you'd like to make a recommendation for one of these daily movie reviews, or something maybe we could do a bigger, more badass episode on the formal Zoobox Goes to the Movies, please leave it in the comments. I'll put it on the list, and we'll see what happens, right? Also, if you are a big Stanley Kubrick fan, the Kubrick Boys, Big Paul coming back for next week's episode of Zoobox Goes to the Movies. We're going to be talking about 2001's A Space Odyssey, so get a fresh watch of that in. We read the book. We watched the movie a bunch of times. We're going through the research area, for Arthur C. Clarke, and watching documentaries and coming up with our own theories and taking notes. It's a ton of fun, and it should be a great episode. And watching something like Force of Nature is actually a little bit of a reprieve from that. I'm like, I gotta chill the fuck out. I'm going deep on a lot of stuff lately, and I was like, I gotta watch something where I just like turn the old brain off. Kind of worked. My brain starts turning too fast because I'm like, this could be fixed so easily. But anyways, adios.